Oh, I had to do it. You know what I mean? I haven't done it in a while, but welcome to Paranormal as we get into. Oh, we have a new person here, and I'm sure they're calling out somebody else, but it must be one of your followers, Jake.
Yep. Hopefully we'll have a few of them here tonight.
Awesome. Well, it's great because we get to put, their comments in here, but for those who are just tuning in, we'll kind of banter for a little bit before we get deep into the show, as always, because we just want to wait till others kind of come into place. But for those who don't know, we've had the wonderful Jake Fife here before, and we've actually talked some amazing stuff. Jake, I think in all the conversations we've had, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of everything you've experienced over the years, have we?
Oh no, we've looked at little sections of bigger puzzle pieces.
Yeah. And so tonight's going to be kind of fun because for those who tuned in about 2 weeks ago, we were talking UFOs, and Jake has some experience within that as well. So this is going to be fun to be able to talk in that as well. But before we get started, got to say hello to the lovely and talented Miss Annie.
Hello. Hi, Jake.
Hey, Annie. How are you doing?
Long time no see, hon.
It's been a very long time.
It has.
Well, I know you've been out there. You've been doing quite a few interviews over the time, including the Ghost Bikers or Bike. Yeah, wait. If I said it wrong, I'm not trying to be offensive.
You're
I just
good.
can't remember. But, and I think that's cool. I have watched them do a couple of shows, and they have some amazing shows.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there are so many amazing podcasts out there that, you can really get lost, just finding them all.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I actually had a student today. We weren't even talking. They don't even know me as far as in the paranormal world. The first thing they started talking about was paranormal. And I thought, oh boy, they must have watched the show. And then they started talking about Art Bell.
Mm-hmm. Good old Coast to Coast.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, the man has passed away, God rest his soul. But he brought in some amazing people as well over the years. And so when we talk in the paranormal world about experience, we're kind of learning it sometimes through others. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, I've been doing this for 13 years and, you never stop learning.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I think I told you before, I can't remember, but where I got into the paranormal was I was a kid. And I didn't even know what paranormal was, to be honest. It was more of, what is this? How does this work? And the very first mystery that I solved, which was a fun mystery at the time, was the Bloody Mary mystery.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Do you remember how they want you to do that to experience it?
So the version I always heard is, I guess, the more like stripped back version because it's so easy and basic. But pretty much you're supposed to stand in front of a mirror in a dark room and say Bloody Mary 3 times. And then when you turn on the lights, she's there.
Okay, so
That's the version I always heard.
You got the opposite version than me. We had the lights on, and we'd either blink really fast or have to turn around. And then you're looking in the mirror, and the third time the lights go off, and then you see this red, beady eyes staring back at you, and you're just like, ah, and run out the room.
No, I heard Jake's version.
Really? With the lights off first?
The
And then
lights
turn it? Wow. Okay. See, my version, the way we had to do it, I figured that out right away. That was an optical illusion. It was a great optical illusion to scare the snot out of people, but so I'm curious. I mean, we know that later down the line, Hollywood kind of grabbed a story similar and ran with it, which was Candyman.
Oh, I had was listening to a podcast when I was going up to see my son in New York. He had it on, and I can't remember the guy's name. I did write it down, and told me the history of the Candyman.
Is there a history? Is he for real? Like urban legend?
It's kind of a long story, but there was this recluse lady, and she kept hearing voices and stuff and called the cops saying someone was trying to break in. They did live in the Cabrini Green, I think it was, apartments, whatever, Chicago. And some of the apartments, you could take out the medicine cabinet and crawl through and go through these vents. And they ended up murdering her. And it was like one of these locked door murders kind of things, and they couldn't figure it out. And that's what started the Candyman.
Interesting.
I can see a combination between the two. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Jake, what was your very first paranormal experience?
So the very first one that I remember is probably around the age of 3 or 4. And it's waking up in the middle of the night in our house in West Virginia and seeing shadow figures going in and out of doorways, walking up and down the hallways. That's the first memory I have, really. But my first real paranormal experience that made me start questioning things was I was 9 years old, about to turn 10, and we were just about to move to where we currently live in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And where we lived was on top of a mountain surrounded by woods, but at this time they were building a water tower about 75 yards up the ridge from us. So whenever I would come home from school, I was in 4th grade at the time. I used to go outside and play with our 2 dogs. They're Australian Shepherds, Lance and Lady. Best dogs anyone could ever have. But one day I just went out, was playing with them, and something caught their eye up near the water tower. And I remember just hearing them growl and just barking away. I'd never heard before. And I remember looking up at the water tower. Something just told me to look up there. And I could see just 2 dark figures just standing there watching me. And I remember, I could tell they were male and female. The female looked a little skittish. The male, I remember, was wearing to me, it looked like a Native American headdress and had a spear in his right hand. And he kind of had his arm around the woman with his other hand. And I remember they were just looking at me. And even though they were 75-ish yards away, it felt like we were making eye contact from a distance. And, it was one of those moments where time stood still. I don't remember hearing anything around me. You're just hyper-focused on what's happening. So I remember, looking at these figures and my dogs go taking off after them. And I remember the male figure looks at the dogs and then looks at me and does like a side nod like this. And then they just calmly do like a military about face, walk behind the water tower. And, at the time, like, okay, these are obviously people. I've just sat there and stared at them for about 20 to 30 seconds. So I'm just waiting for them to come out in the clearing. They never do. So I watch my dogs go up there. They run around, they never see anything. And it was after that experience that, I had questions. I knew my dad was into the spooky stuff. But, this was the first time that I had felt like I had witnessed an actual ghost. and I wanted to learn more.
Right. You know, that's interesting. I mean, just on its own, my first experience with a shadow person, I thought somebody was in my house.
Uh-huh.
So you getting to see that, and not only just for yourself, you get, in a sense, a form of a confirmation through your pets,
Yeah.
your dogs. They're seeing it as well. That to me really says more than, that they kind of prove of existence. I know that sounds weird. I see poor Annie like, yeah, come on, spit it out, dude.
No,
Um,
no, 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 no. My head. It's hot in here. Remember?
oh yeah. Oh no, 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 no. You got it nice compared to me. um, but no, I mean, yeah, these are, I've heard a lot of beginning stories from people who've had the experiences, but
Mhm.
I'm going to be honest, not just because you're our guest, but I've never heard anyone have such a unique experience with a shadow person as you have.
Yeah.
This
I
is
mean,
pretty.
I've spent the last 13 years trying to explain my very first encounter, and I'm no closer 13 years later than I was the day it happened.
What do you think? Okay, now there's mixed reactions from other guests that we've had in the past, but what do you think pretty much a shadow person is? Do you think I'm not going to give you hint answers here because I mean that's what everybody else's opinions were. I'm kind of curious what your opinion could be.
So I think shadow people, shadow figures, it's more complex than just about any other type of entity, simply because you have different types of shadow people. I think there is an interdimensional element to it.
Right.
I think it could simply be that's as much energy as they can manifest. And instead of like a shadow person, it's just, a half formed person, like
Right.
you and I. It's not some alien, it's not a time traveler, it's not a demon or anything like that. I just think sometimes that's as much energy as they can manifest. I think sometimes different entities can take on that form. I think there is not a lot of customization. That would probably be the wrong word. But I do think that certain entities can shapeshift their appearance to a certain extent. So I think shadow people, it's not something you can say, oh, they're interdimensional entities, and that's it. Or you can't say, oh, they're demons. You can't say, oh, they're just dead people. It's a layered thing, and
Yeah.
that's why it's so tough to give like, oh, it's this, and just let that be that.
Yeah. I mean, Annie, you've known some of our guests have basically concluded that they figure shadow people were demons.
I don't think so either.
I don't either because they're not as malevolent as
Hmm.
we know with demonic entities. I mean, gosh, the last house I was in, Jake, my wife
Hmm.
was attacked, but in a weird way, enough that she's scratched on the back of the arm, and it looks
Yeah.
like somebody perfectly took a razor and
Hmm.
did 3 marks down her arm.
Ugh.
And it was just like, okay, I know what this is, and no, we're not having this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
It starts getting physical. That's when
yeah,
that's when it gets serious.
yes, and trust me, we've had a lot of people bless that house, but we couldn't. I don't know why things like that stuck around. We could
Hmm.
not figure that out. We figure maybe it's the house itself,
Yeah.
but when you're in the paranormal world, um, I'm trying not to sound bad because I'm not trying to be disrespectful to others, but we do tend to hear a lot of people right away the second ghost, paranormal, whatever. Oh, demons, demons. That's all we ever hear. That's the first
Yeah.
thing people are screaming out. And we have to try to explain to them, no, 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 no. That's not really the case.
Right.
How have you handled situations like that?
So the first thing that I do in a situation like that is first get the person to calm down. Once you have someone not necessarily being out of control, But when they start introducing that frenetic, that chaotic energy, even if there isn't a demon or a negative entity there, it can attract them, or it can introduce more energy into a situation that you do not want more energy going to the wrong entities.
Right.
So the first thing that I usually try to do is get the person to calm down and then tell them, hey, that's not what this is. But even if it is, here's what we're going to do. And I usually, if I'm in a group, I have everyone do, their safety techniques, practices, and we all kind of just center ourselves,
Sure.
because in life, as well as in the paranormal, you have to move from a position of strength and a position of security and safety, no matter what. Even if, it costs you the greatest evidence, we'll ever see. I don't recommend, and I've broken this rule many times, so I can't really say anything. But yeah, do not go into a situation that you do not feel 110% secure about.
Sure. Would you recommend people going into do investigations in the dark or in the light?
I would say if it's your very first time, I would say the daytime. But I'm in the camp that believes it doesn't have to be nighttime for there to
Yes.
be a paranormal experience.
Yes, I
In
agree with
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had probably 65 to 70% of my paranormal encounters have been in the daytime. So I think if you're just getting into it, and of course you have that, I guess, trigger happy mindset where everything's demons, you know, be
That's
in the
so
daylight.
Hollywood.
It is, but you have people with different beliefs, different experiences, whether it's stuff that they've experienced or learned themselves or how they were brought up. So, it's a trick because you have to respect and understand where people are coming from, even if it's contrary to how you approach or believe something. And you have to create that happy middle before you
Right.
can have a safe and successful paranormal investigation.
I totally agree with that. Gosh, I can't tell you how many people tell us, "Oh no, the best investigations in the dark."
No.
I mean,
It's
personally,
more fun. It's thrilling.
yeah, it's thrilling and it's also fun to scare the snot out of your other members that are with you. But
With my luck,
that's
I trip over things, so
that's my thought. I'm gonna be walking and all you're gonna hear is clank clank. Oh, son of a
bam.
things falling. Yeah,
Yep.
that's me. Um, so let's go back. Okay, so we know your first experience. What was your first investigation?
So my very first investigation where I went out with equipment was at our behind our house. We have an old kitchen. Back in the day, pre 1900s, the kitchen used to be separate from the house.
Yes.
And we have one of those buildings, and there for a while we had it cleared out. Wasn't much in it. So my dad and I, we would go there in the evenings, and he would show me how to use a voice recorder. Which at the time I had a cheap Olympus voice recorder from Walmart. They're like $15. But what I also learned on around the same time was my dad had an old cassette recorder, and he had a bunch of old cassette tapes from his investigation times, in the late 80s, early 90s, that he didn't use. And so I learned how to load the cassettes, how to record, use a microphone. And that's really how I honed my craft with EVP, was getting really personal with the experience, picking out the right tape, knowing how much time is on it, knowing how to ask the right questions, and then I just go back, put it in the tape deck, and then I would listen for it. So that's really my first investigation, was in the summer kitchen and some of the abandoned buildings we have on our property. And of course, over time, I went to cemeteries, and I did that for a while. We would occasionally do certain battlefields, and that's really how I got my start. Probably my first 200 investigations were between those three types of locations.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So definitely secured locations.
Oh yeah, very very secured.
Yeah. Have you now? I know because, like I said, it's you and your father in the beginning. Have you ever ventured off on your own now with investigations?
So there has always been, moments or instances where I've kind of gone out and done my own thing. And that's typically, because our schedules, don't align. He's
Right.
he'll work, I'm off, I'm off, he'll work, that kind of deal. But my favorite investigations is whenever my dad's with me, because not only is, it fun, not only is it fun father son time, but it is also, he knows way more than I do. But I do like investigating with other people, to kind of see their approach. You can learn
Right.
something from everyone. And, going back to breaking safety rules, sometimes I like to, do investigations by myself. I think there's peacefulness to it. I also think that you become more in tune with the investigation, with the spirits, and with the environment. And, in the kind of darker side of it, it does kind of force you to be more in tune with yourself and heighten your sensitivity and your protection techniques.
True. That's a good point. I would never suggest anyone does an investigation by
No,
themselves.
it's a horrible, horrible idea.
Yeah. uh, that is definite, especially like what is that? I can't think of it. That sanitarium that everybody wants to go to now.
Hmm.
That's really just starting to fall apart. Could you imagine being up on the third or fourth floor, walking and boop? Okay, help.
Yeah, I mean, you go from the third floor to the first floor, and you lose all your phones and walkie talkies. You're like, well, crap.
Yeah. Now I got to go back up there. Yeah.
It's like, oh
As we're
crap, my
laying on the
stuff's up
floor,
there.
it's like, hey, if there's any ghost up there, can you top? Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah.
I will say I've never fallen through floors before, but I have fallen in grapes before. That has happened.
Ooh.
Oh
Yeah.
Lord.
Not
Ooh.
fun. Not fun at
No.
all.
I have fallen through floor. Well, not like stories, but like
Hmm.
feet going down, and that's about as far as it goes. And it's like, help. Um, that is a kind of scary situation. Never want to. I would never suggest that. Here's my
Yeah.
thing that I always tell people is check for stability first.
Yeah.
Um, I can tell you I've been in buildings that looks like you can just kick it and it's going down.
Yeah.
And doing an investigation in something like that, the wrong wind comes, you're trapped. You
Hmm.
never really want to put yourself in such a horrible situation.
Hmm.
So you're instantly, making sure somebody's with you always for some kind of help.
Yeah. Always.
Yeah. The other part that I would say, and I'm curious about, is after 13 years of doing this, is is there a point where you say, I think I've done enough?
No. No, I think that goes along with the whole you never stop learning.
Yeah.
I remember why I got into the field when I was 10. And, over time, I've kept that same mission statement or the same goals, but, I've added a few on,
Sure.
so there's always something that keeps me coming back to the field. And, something that's really helped me, kind of, I guess, maintain the longevity is I don't just do, ghosts and hauntings. I do mysteries, I do, historical cases, I do, Bigfoot, UFOs, basically anything strange and mysterious. That's kind of what I do. So if I ever start feeling burnout on, like ghosts, I can kind of shift my mind to, what's some UFO stuff. And then, I can move to Bigfoot, Loch Ness, I can, you just kind of bounce around a little bit.
Sure. And that makes perfect sense. I like
Mhm.
the idea of being able to be versatile in
Yeah.
such a way. I
Mm.
mean, a lot of people just don't have that versatility, and so eventually they're just okay, I'm done. you know.
Yeah. Well, not to call anyone out, but I feel like sometimes people kind of get in a rut. They do the public investigations, then they do the private investigations, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That stuff's a lot of fun.
No.
But,
Yeah.
over time, it's just, it's kind of like a rinse and repeat type process, just in a different place, sometimes with different people.
I totally agree.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, you have to introduce a new element, try a new technique. You have your approach to the paranormal, you see someone else's, so you go out and say, "Hey, I would like to try this and see what happens." So it's
Yeah,
it's that kind of stuff. I think that also helps keep it fresh.
right. Okay, so one more question and then we'll switch into the bigger part of the topic today.
Hmm.
And I want to know Annie's response as well because I just discovered this. I did not know this, but in certain states, and I won't call any out like California, uh, paranormal investigators can charge a lot of money to do an
Yes.
investigation.
Hmm.
Now, I already see her shaking her head, and she's like me. We're going to help, not make money.
Right. Yeah, that's my approach as well. I've never done a residential case, but I've consulted on over 100.
Right.
And I believe any group that believes in approaching the investigation for a monetary gain, that's something you should be wary of.
Yeah.
There's always a debate of what about lodging, or food or gas, comps, and that's a different argument. But if you're approaching an investigation, a family's coming to you for help, like, hey, we can't, sleep, we can't stay in our house, and your response is, okay, it's $200, pay up. I think there's something wrong there. Now,
Yeah.
like
Well,
I said, every person has their own approach to it. I think there is an ethical way to do it. There is an unethical way to do it. But I will never ever charge for investigations.
here's a situation that I came across, and Annie's response is going to be worth this too. In the particular state, this couple were doing their investigations. They at first were going to be arrested
Hmm.
for taking advantage of seniors
Hmm.
because they were charging upwards of $5,000
Oh,
for an initial visit. And then they would tell them, we have to come back, which will be another $10,000. But we're going to try to remove that spirit for you.
that's
That's wrong.
totally
Hmm.
wrong.
And the couple that went to court over this situation won because of that state's rules that these people can charge.
Yeah, but karma always comes back and wins
Oh,
in
I
the end.
totally agree with
Yeah.
that. I totally agree with that. Do you think that's going to hurt paranormal investigators who are like us that do it to help people?
No, because I think if we're firm in why we're in the field, what our purpose and mission is, I don't think stuff like that will affect us.
I have
You
to
know.
agree with that. Yeah,
Well, I
totally
was
agree with that.
on one of our, I don't know what it was, one of our local groups, and this woman made mention of something like that, and the people that they were having come in were going to charge them money. And I told her if it's a good, respectable person, they're not going to charge you anything.
Hmm.
They're not in there for the business. They're here to help.
Right.
Well, I did work with the Taps, part of the Taps family, and I did not. They never once said, "Oh, we're charging" or anything like that. They came to help the people, and they got there fast.
Hmm.
And I mean, they were very polite. They were very professional. I mean, you could swear these guys had been doing this for decades.
Right.
And I mean, most of them were brand new to
Hmm.
the team. It
And
was
then
their
one guy,
first.
he doesn't fly, so they drive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, this was not a moment of working with Jason or Grant. I wish it was. So, but they do have family, as they call them, stretched out throughout, and so these guys represented them very well. I was impressed by that. So
Hmm.
you get the idea of how the professionalism and how the right teams work, and then you get that other part. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let's go into the heart of this story tonight. So Jake shared with me a an amazing story here. It is the story of the alleged 1964 Fisherville UFO landing and the chaos that followed all of that. Before I try to put this video all together in here, I notice I said try. Um, would you like to give us a little backstory on that?
So, some of the backstory of the case is in 1964, December 21st, gunsmith Horace Burns was traveling home when he noticed a strange object over his left shoulder out the window. And according to Burns, he watched the vehicle in the sky go through the air over his car. And when it passed his car stopped. He said it wasn't like the engine died, it ran out of gas, the car just stopped.
Interesting.
And he said he was somehow able to get it to go to the shoulder of the road. And he watched this object, which he described as a 125-foot tall beehive. Actually, 90-foot high beehive is 125 feet wide, land gently. So he got out of his truck and walked up to it. And he said he got pretty close, probably within 75, 100 yards of it. And he watched it for about, he said, probably 30, 40 seconds. He said, but it felt like minutes. And then all of a sudden it made a whooshing noise. It gently levitated, went up into the air about 500 feet, and then zoomed back the direction it came from. And he never saw anything else again. So absolutely insane of an encounter. But during my research for this story for the TV station, I ran across Project Blue Book's report. You know, Project Blue Book was a top secret at the time government organization that investigated UFO encounters on behalf of the U.S. Air Force. And they received a tip that a young boy, I think he was like 8 or 9 years old, 10 miles south of where Mr. Burns had his sighting, saw a cigar-shaped object that he described as just gently floating over the city of Waynesboro, and then it zoomed in the same direction that Burns's beehive vehicle did. So it was absolutely insane. Years and years ago, I think it was like 2016, 2017, I did a YouTube video on Fife Paranormal's YouTube about it. But it was kind of like a surface level type thing. It was nowhere near like what you see on screen. But when I went to put this together, you know, this is for the TV stations. You know, it's going, you know, in a professional setting to an audience of, you know, thousands. So I wanted to go all out. So I contacted the guy who did the original article I based my first video off of. And he told me that through a contact he had with the CIA and the FBI, that he was able to get the original case files intact from Project Blue Book's top secret investigation. And he sent me all of those copies, plus some newspaper clippings. So I pretty much had everything you could ever hope for, you know, when I did this project. And, you know, what I thought was going to take 2 weeks to do ended up taking me 2.5 months to do.
Wow.
Yeah, okay, it's just so much information.
We know now Jake's got to come back because Project Blue Book, we did that. Oh my God, I have to look up the information.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say we did that story back in 2009 when we were on the on a different radio station at the time. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that Project Blue Book was really interesting. I was able to get some information, but being that I was a military brat, my dad was Air Force, there was a lot of information I could not reveal.
Yeah.
And I still can't reveal to this day. You know, my dad was stationed on a private military Air Force installment base, which people know nowadays as Edwards Air Force Base. Still was then too, but they did a lot of top secret, you know, private flying events and other events. So, and believe it or not, NASA is connected to that base. So there would be a lot of additional behind the scenes on some of this information. So yeah, Project Blue Book. Oh my God, that's a
It's fascinating. Very
yes,
going back, to Project Sign, Project Grudge, and then Blue Book, what it was, it changed so much from 52 when it started to 60 when Kantala took over, Major Kantala. It's so fascinating, and the fact that it was top secret, like their big investigations, but
right,
you looked at like Ruppelt. You looked at, Quintala and some of their other investigators, and then, their scientific consultant, Dr. Alan Hynek. They were public for certain things. So the public was aware of their existence. And they did do press conferences, but it was, whenever they were kind of shooting something down, no
right.
pun intended. So being able to look at the private files and to see, written at the top, classified, and to see these agents communicating, and basically saying, we've never dealt with something like this before. They had to get the state police almost involved. The National Guard was notified because local law enforcement lost control of an entire county, Augusta County, Virginia, because people just lost faith in law enforcement and the government. And, it was absolutely insane. And I did find a few mentionings in newspapers, all across the East Coast, that people did get wounded, because you would have mobs patrolling the streets. They
Oh
would see
gosh, yeah.
something, and, they would think it's an alien, so they'd start shooting at it. And there was one case where I think it was like a 30-year-old man was out with his son looking for UFOs in just the wrong place, wrong time. And he got shot in the arm, because he thought he was an alien. So it
Yeah.
was complete chaos. And I think it's one of those, I feel like there's more there than that's even in the Blue Book file. I have found references to photographs. I have found references to accurate Geiger counter readings that were hidden from the press. That's not even in the final report. And I did find one stray mentioning of a 16 millimeter video camera being brought. So I know somewhere in Wright-Patterson or in the National Archives, there's footage and there's photographs of, a more detailed version of this story.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, but let's go ahead and break into this story here. We have video and I have it up now. So we'll take a look at this.
For years, people have been reporting strange objects and lights in the sky over the Shenandoah Valley. From December 1964 through May of 1965, there were almost a dozen reports in Augusta County alone. All of this was started by a reported UFO landing near Fishersville that prompted Project Blue Book, a top secret UFO investigation program, to launch an investigation. I'm Jacob Fife. Join me as I take a closer look at the reported landing and dig into recently declassified reports from the investigation. On December 21st, 1964, gunsmith Horace Burns claimed to have seen a 90-foot-high beehive UFO land in the field behind me. According to Burns, when he was driving towards Waynesboro, his car came to a stop. And after he had restarted and pulled his car over, he looked in the field behind me and claimed to see a huge UFO with a beaming light underneath. So Burns, being curious, got up and went to go see what was happening. And when he got close to the craft, around 20 to 30 feet, he said it made no sound, but it did emit a strange heat from the bottom of it. He said it sat there for a few minutes before slowly hovering about 20 feet in the air and then taking off straight up and disappearing. Now, Burns was able to get back in his vehicle, which he noted had somehow shifted itself into park while he was gone, which was a little strange. So he went 4 days without reporting the sighting until he talked to his wife, who convinced him to not only talk to a local reporter about it, but also send a report to a secret program called Project Blue Book. What was Blue Book? Blue Book followed two other projects, Project Sign in 1947 and Project Grudge in 1948. The purpose of these projects was to investigate and study UFO sightings and determine whether or not they posed a threat. Starting in 1952, investigations were launched into reports all over the country. By the end of the program in 1969, Blue Book investigated almost 13,000 reports. 701 were deemed unexplained. For Blue Book to investigate a case, there had to be a possible threat, and the rash of sightings was enough for them to send multiple agents to Fishersville. So after Mr. Burns sent his report off to Project Blue Book headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, they actually reviewed it for a few days. They were probably trying to decide whether or not there was potential national security threat, but they ultimately decided that there was. And they didn't just send any reporter or investigator. They sent Sergeant David Moody, who was one of the top officials in Project Blue Book, and he was usually only sent to the biggest UFO cases. So Moody and two other investigators boarded a plane at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they flew in here to the Shenandoah Valley Regional Airport. Now, Moody was always a skeptic. In every investigation, he quickly dismisses the eyewitnesses and the claims of people's sightings, and he usually had very short reports, but Fishersville was different. And once they got off the plane and checked in, they were met by Burns, a professor from Eastern Mennonite University who took the initial Geiger counter readings with Burns, and one other person, and they drove towards Fishersville. The whole way they were talking about the sighting. Moody had a list of questions that he was asking the professor as well as Mr. Burns. And then the investigation reached a whole other level. After the investigators arrived, they questioned Burns and then a reporter who was the initial one to break the story about the sighting, the road, and then how he felt afterwards. Now, in the initial reports, Sergeant Moody said that Burns seemed legit. He didn't seem to be hoaxing, making up as he went, and that his details and account stayed true to what he had initially reported. So Burns and the reporter took the investigators from Blue Book all over this area. They brought their own Geiger counter equipment, and even though it had been over 2 weeks since his sighting, they still found strange impressions in the ground, strange impressions that would not end up in the government report, but were reported in a local newspaper article. Towards the end of the investigation, they would once again interview Burns, and it seems to be that they tried to trip him up on as little detail as possible, but every single time, Burns kept his story straight, and the Blue Book investigators were confused by what had taken place. Stanton would become the epicenter of UFO sightings as well as UFO reporting and later even UFO panic. After the initial Fishersville sighting was reported, local reporters would flock to the story and they would try to compile as many UFO related stories as they could. So Stanton was a big community even in the 1960s, and word traveled very, very fast. So once word came to town that investigators from Project Blue Book had flown in from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, people quickly started wondering, are we in danger? Is everything okay? Are we actually under attack? So throughout the course of Blue Book's investigation, they would not only hang around Fishersville and Stanton, they would go all over Rockingham and Augusta County, and they would even take a trip all the way to Charlottesville to the observatory that was there at the time. So every step of the way of their investigation, no matter where they went, reporters from Stanton and Waynesboro would follow them. After the panic set in, after a few more sightings in February, many people would flock to Stanton because they felt like this was the epicenter, this is where it began. Many locals were adamant that they saw something strange in the skies. And they felt like with the UFO sightings growing in numbers, and even some people believing that they were getting closer to people, they felt like Augusta County and their lives were in danger, that the local sheriff was requesting help from the Virginia National Guard as well as the state police because people were congregating in Stanton and in Waynesboro and forming militias. And what they would do is they would patrol street corners, back roads, and even the main roads. with armed posses looking for aliens. And this would cause a huge flare up in sightings as well as people getting injured. So, with the sightings getting out of control, what was Blue Book doing to kind of ease people's fears when something like this would happen? Well, as it turns out, they didn't do much except for go silent and discredit anyone and everyone who claimed to have seen something.
Goodness.
So things really kicked up a notch in Augusta County when a local preacher started claiming that the recent sightings of UFOs and the close proximity to people was a sign of the apocalypse. After a while, word started spreading through Augusta and Rockingham and even Rockbridge County through congregations that the UFO sightings were a sign of the apocalypse. And not only that, but that the apocalypse was going to take place right here. So that was really the main catalyst for why and how things got out of control, to where even local law enforcement really couldn't stop the panic. Everywhere, people were talking about the latest sightings. Some people were saying that they saw creatures in the woods. They saw creatures looking out of these ships. A lot of these sightings would go unreported until years later. But local journalists, they ran absolutely wild with this. And that's what made the Project Blue Book investigation so intriguing. You see, Sergeant Moody was only called to investigate the most credible and potentially dangerous UFO sighting. So the fact that he was here in the first place means that they must have felt that there was a threat to national security and public safety here in Augusta County. So the Project Blue Book investigators got here on January 12th, 1965. But they left in early February. So even though sightings and the investigation was really just getting started and heating up, and there were multiple sightings being reported per day, why did they leave so soon? Well, I found a report that said they were called back because there was another incident taking place between an unidentified flying object and a U.S. Air Force fighter jet in Ohio. Now, that's all the report and the letter says. And after looking online, I wasn't able to find any documentation of what they were talking about. But whatever it was caused Blue Book to recall all of their investigators from this case and 2 other cases back to headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So what happened with that U.S. fighter encounter? And why hasn't it been talked about? Why are there no files or records or stories? Whatever it was the reason the Fishersville investigation stopped, but that wasn't the end of Blue Book's involvement. So after Sergeant Moody and the rest of the Blue Book investigators went back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, UFO sightings would still continue to be reported to local papers as well as local police departments. But as quickly as they came, UFO sightings went away. And slowly, life returned to normal in Augusta and Rockingham County. People forgot about the little surge and what was going on. People quickly forgot about it, except for Project Blue Book. According to not a report, but a letter between the director and Sergeant Moody, Project Blue Book would keep a secret presence in Augusta County, particularly Stanton, all the way up until September of 1965. Why? Well, they don't exactly say. But maybe they felt there was still a national security risk. And that's why they kept investigators hidden among the crowds here in Stanton. Who knows? Maybe people are still here.
Okay. All right, Jake, I got to do this for you.
Alone. On December 21st, 1964, gunsmith
All right. So here we go. This is Jake's gonna really get embarrassed for the moment.
That was fascinating.
Thanks. It's not my best report.
Well, all right, ladies, we're gonna raffle off tonight all this opportunity to have this young man for dinner. No.
It is weird, doing this in a suit and tie,
I was gonna say, I mean, you look like you're prepared to actually be on the news. So is this your full-time job? Are you actually doing news?
Yes. I do work for a TV station. My position is actually digital content producer. So I oversee everything online, whether it be, website, social media accounts, YouTube channel, apps, anything and everything digital. So
Right.
I also have a subcategory to my job where, if needed, I'm also a reporter. And, part of my job is creating digital content. So they've really given me a long leash in terms of what I can cover. So, really, I'm blessed because I can do just about any story I want, within
Right.
reason. So that's really what gave me the freedom to do something on UFOs, and I'm glad I did. I mean, for a while, it was the number one story in our entire company, which is over like 200, I think like 10 stations, across the country. It was number one for like a day and a half, which usually
Wow.
stories stay at the top for 30 minutes max.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was the number one story and video between our stations in the state of Virginia for 3 days. Nothing could top it. No breaking news, no sports, no news, no politics, nothing topped this. And, I'm very proud, but I'm also very lucky, that I work where I do with the amazing people that I do.
Right. So I think we should say over 1,000 likes and you can win a dinner with Jay.
I don't know how my girlfriend would feel about that.
Right? She's like, well, if I get something out of it, no. That was an amazing story.
Thank you.
I really liked it. There, you do leave some good openings there to want to know. I mean, how is this town taking it today?
Today, no one really remembers it. I
Really?
mean, yeah, when I was putting the report together, I put a few feelers out, in some of the paranormal and UFO communities, in the 2 counties I mentioned in the story, and no one remembered it. They're like, no, my dad might remember, and then they'd be like, oh, I told him, he doesn't remember. But when I released the story, the next day I had several emails from people, and they were like, hey, I was in elementary school when this happened, I remembered it, it just took me seeing it,
Right.
and I had one lady who actually called the station, and she said she was in kindergarten, and it was like a big deal for her father, because he was in like the Civil Air Patrol or something like that. But she said the way that I described it was exactly how it happened and exactly how she remembered people responding to it. And I will say this, it's a long report. It's 11 and a half minutes. It's actually funny.
It was worth it.
Yeah, a piece of it, I don't know where, but CNN requested it. And
Wow.
I don't know where it's CNN and it aired, but I was told that a version of it did air on a CNN affiliate, at one point. So that was really, really cool. But, looking at network, saying I remember telling them, you really want something about aliens? I'm like, you're CNN, They're like, oh,
No,
cool.
I've seen stuff like that on CNN before, so that wouldn't surprise me any that they would ask for something similar to that. But even at that was, I mean, the fact that you got some pretty cool information, you were able to dig up some parts of the history that. I mean, we're talking 1964. It's more than buried. People aren't looking at that anymore. So, and then we mentioned Project Blue Book, and here's this, controversy that's been silenced for so long. But what we don't know, or a few people don't know, let me rephrase that, is Project Blue Book didn't just center around certain bases. I mean, it was used at a lot of military bases. But the one that everybody believed it centered around, can you remember which one it is?
The one I know is, Wright-Patterson, because that's where their headquarters were.
Yep. And so they assumed that they had that information there. Okay. So,
okay, I'm going to be really dumb, but where's Patterson?
That's the actual term for Area 51. That is the name of the building.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool, not to interrupt, but when I was putting this story together, I actually contacted Wright-Patterson. and I didn't expect anything. Did
I
not
would.
at all.
I wouldn't have
But
either.
I contacted them, just an email, and I was like, "Hey, I know your stuff has been transferred to the National Archives, but do you have anything relating to this investigation?" And 2 days later, I got an email, and I'll be honest, I was kind of scared to touch it because come
Right.
in 9 o'clock in the morning, and I see at the very top of my email feed, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, U.S. I'm like, uh oh.
I'm in trouble.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but
Exactly.
they actually responded.
How
And,
good.
and it wasn't like, no, this never happened. It was actually, hey, we did take part in this investigation. All of our, you're right, all of our stuff has been transferred to the National Archives. If we see anything else laying around, we'll send it your way. Let us know if we can be further assistance. And I was
Yeah.
like, huh, I did not expect that from the U.S. Air
I'll be
Force.
honest, I would not have expected it either,
Yeah.
only because I know how hush hush they've been. But
Mhm.
then again, as of late, the Pentagon, we've reported a couple of weeks ago, the Pentagon is slowly releasing information, so
Mhm.
we're starting to find out things, but they're not technically. They wanted to change the term. Period. They don't want to
Right.
call them UFOs. They want
They're
to call them
UAPs.
UAPs. Exactly.
Yeah, which makes sense. I'm for that. It makes sense.
But at the same time, I mean, we've got groups like MUFON
Yeah.
that their sole goal is to investigate such events,
Yeah.
and so that's where I was going to ask: did you reach out to MUFON to see if they had any history
I
on it?
did. I did reach out to MUFON and never heard back. Which I
Oh,
thought was funny. I figured it would be the other way around, not
right,
hear from Wright-Patterson, get something from MUFON. But no, I did not get anything from MUFON. And I contacted the University of Virginia because I don't think the observatory is still around. But I was hoping that they would have something. But no, never heard back from UVA.
huh? Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of sad. I would
Yeah.
really have loved to see what some of these places. I mean, they've been around for so long; they should have
Mhm.
information. What information could they reveal at this point?
Right.
And you're just like, yay,
Yeah. I
but
mean, there's so much to this case that, still to this day, it doesn't make sense to me. What I covered in that report and in the article was only about 55% of what was
really, I would have
in the
felt it was.
report.
I would
You
have felt
know,
there's something more hiding than 50.
there's a lot, and I have kind of spread it over a few articles. There was one I released is like, when did I release? It was like a month ago, and it was 14-year-old boy sees cigar shaped craft over Stanton, and that was a part of that investigation. But when you create something like this, you don't want it to be 10,000 years long. You don't want 10,000 words necessarily. And, it was one of those deals. I started this because on March 3rd, we had over 30 calls to our newsroom because people were reporting strange objects in the sky. And it turned
Wow.
out to be a conjunction of two planets. And that's kind of, I've been on the fence about doing this. I already had everything in place. I just, I didn't feel confident in doing it and that people would actually watch it. But getting, those accounts, I stayed way past, when I clocked out, talking people through this. There was a lady crying with her kids, like, it's getting closer. And it wasn't, it was an illusion. But, I became a perfectionist with it, like I am with all of my reports. I got to the point where I was adding so much information that, it kind of hamstrung me. I was standing still while mentally running forward. So I do have a follow-up version planned for, I guess it would be like the 60th anniversary next year, which I'm probably going to go all out with it. I do have, my 4K cinema camera.
Right.
So there is going to be another version of that will come out.
Right. Right. Well, I do want to take a moment before we run out of time here, as people might have saw just a moment ago, that we do want to promote Fife Paranormal on YouTube as well. You could go check that out. Or if you just happily type in Jake Fife, you will find a lot of wonderful links there.
There's interesting stuff. There's my paranormal, there's my photography, there's history, and then there's the stuff I get into with the news.
Yes. So, including the Ghost Bikers Garage, I believe is the name of that group.
Yes, with Miranda Young. Yep.
Yeah, and they interviewed you, which was pretty cool. So, I've started watching that, and I did not get to finish it. I got tied up with some other things, but I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep watching, so I will have that in.
I appreciate it.
But even at that, folks, if you have not seen those, you've got to go watch it because they did a great interview with Jake, and I can't argue with that. For those that are watching, thank you guys for tuning in and checking us out. Jake, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're always so fascinating.
I appreciate it. It's always an honor to be on the show.
Well, we're gonna definitely have to get you back. We'll go into some more topics that you have. I want you to do this. This will make this your homework for the next possible show. Is pick a topic that you've never had a chance to talk about that we could actually be breaking news.
That's an easy one. I already have it in mind.
There we go. So you guys know Jake's gonna be back. Yep.
That's it. Just name your time.
All right. And for those that are tuning in, get ready. I know next week we're going to kind of follow up on our UFO show and try to, finish that out. But I am working on getting our NASA rocket scientist on because there was a major event that happened from the sun that could be affecting the Earth. What is it? What is it going to do? And how scared should we be? If we'll have to ask those questions when she's around. So, again, thank you, Jake and Annie.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. And we'll see all of you guys next week right here on Paranormal.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night.